I stood outside the Westfield Corporate Center as twilight faded over Chicago. The building stood tall, 20 stories high against the darkening sky, all concrete and glass in that boxy late 70s style that architects probably thought looked futuristic back then. Now it just appeared dated. My new security uniform still felt stiff against my skin. The company patch on my shoulder snagged on the car door as I grabbed my lunch bag. I'd packed sandwiches, chips, and enough coffee in my thermos to keep me alert throughout my first night shift. My resume landed me this job within days. Apparently, they needed someone quickly. As I approached, the lobby doors slid open with a mechanical whine. I checked my watch. 10:30 p.m. I was half an hour early, but first impressions count. The cavernous lobby swallowed the sound of my footsteps. A security desk sat near the elevators where a heavy-set man in a uniform matching mine looked up from his phone. "You must be Wilson." He tucked his phone away and stood. "Thomas Rodriguez. Everyone calls me Tom." He reached out to shake my hand. His palm felt clammy and I noticed a slight tremble in his fingers. "Michael," I said, "but Mike is fine." Tom nodded and checked his watch. "Let me get you set up before I head out." He showed me the basics. How to operate the elevator key, where the breaker panels were, which tenants might work late. All standard stuff I'd done at previous security jobs. But Tom was acting strangely. He kept glancing at the clock, his explanation short and rushed. "This is your station," Tom said as he unlocked a small room behind the main desk. Inside sat a desk with several monitor displays, a computer, phones, and cabinets filled with keys and paperwork. "You'll be the only one here at night. Building closes to regular employees at 8 p.m. He pulled an envelope from his pocket and placed it on the desk. "Your keys and access cards are in here along with some standard procedures." I opened the envelope and found a small ring of keys, an electronic pass card, and a typed list labeled Security Protocols, Night Shift. 6 numbered rules filled the page. "Just standard procedure," Tom said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Follow these exactly." I looked over the list quickly. 1. Never answer any phone calls between 11:30 p.m. and 5 a.m. 2. Avoid looking directly at any unusual figures on the security cameras. 3. If the temperature drops suddenly, turn off all lights and remain motionless. 4. Do not open the main doors for anyone after midnight, regardless of who they appear to be. 5. Stay in the supply closet from 3:33 a.m. to 3:57 a.m. every night. 6. Leave the building at exactly 5 a.m. No earlier and no later. These seem oddly specific, I said, looking up at Tom. He busied himself with the security monitors, turning them on one by one. Company policy. The owner's a bit eccentric. His casual tone seemed forced. Now, let me show you the camera system. Tom pointed out each monitor, showing me the feed from different floors. Camera 1 is the main entrance. 2 covers the parking garage. 3 through 8 are the main hallways. 9 through 15 cover the stairwells and elevator banks. His finger tapped nervously on the desk as he went through them. "What about emergency exits?" I asked. Tom showed me a map of the building on the wall, tracing exit routes with his finger. "Fire exits here, here, and here, but don't use them unless absolutely necessary. They trigger an alarm at the monitoring station downtown." I nodded, taking mental notes. "The previous night guard, Jacob, right? Did he leave any specific instructions I should know about?" Tom's hand froze mid-gesture. He looked away, suddenly very interested in straightening papers on the desk. "Family emergency. Had to quit without notice." "That's too bad," I said. "Hope everything's okay with his family." "Yeah," Tom mumbled, still not meeting my eyes. He grabbed a logbook from the shelf and placed it on the desk, clearly changing the subject. "You'll need to log any incidents, regular checks every hour." As he explained the routine, I noticed his hands shaking more obviously. He looked worn out with dark circles under his eyes and an unhealthy color to his skin that made me wonder if he was sick. "One more thing," Tom said, his voice dropping slightly. He pointed to Rule 6 on my list. "This is important. You leave at exactly 5 a.m., not 4:59, not 5:01, exactly 5 a.m. The intensity in his voice caught me off guard. "Okay, any particular reason?" "That's when your relief arrives. Building policy." The explanation came too quickly. Tom looked at his watch again. "I've got to go. Call the main office if you have any problems. Numbers on the desk." He grabbed his stuff in a hurry. "Thanks for the rundown," I said. "I'm sure I'll be fine." Tom stopped at the door, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. "Just follow the rules, Wilson. All of them." Before I could say anything, he left, his footsteps growing quieter down the hall. Alone in the security office, I sat down and checked the rules again. They seemed strange, more like superstitions than actual security procedures. Rule 5 was particularly odd, hiding in a closet for exactly 24 minutes. I figured it was some kind of joke they played on new guards. I grabbed a flashlight from the desk drawer and decided to explore the building. The hallways were long and empty, my footsteps echoing off the marble floors. Each floor looked different. Law firms with wood-paneled walls, tech startups with open spaces, financial companies with rows of empty cubicles. But they all shared the same strange quiet of places meant for people that now sat empty. The building was cold, even though it was summer. I zipped up my jacket as I walked. Everything appeared outdated. Drop ceilings with fluorescent lights, dark windows that showed my reflection, walls painted colors that probably looked good back in the 80s. By the time I finished my walkthrough, it was nearly 11 p.m. I returned to the security office and opened the logbook Tom had shown me. Looking through the recent entries, I found Jacob's notes from the past month. The early ones were neat and normal, all clear on floors 1 to 20. Maintenance replaced light in stairwell B, printer paper delivered to 14th floor. But as I turned the pages, I noticed the handwriting getting messier. The final week's entries were sloppy with heavy pen marks. 2:15 a.m. noises in the walls again. Third night in a row. Temp dropped on 12th floor. No explanation. Evac normal. Time seems wrong after midnight. Clock in west hallway runs backward. The final entry, dated just 3 days ago, was barely legible. They're in the walls. Don't look at them. I closed the book and felt deeply uneasy. This had to be some joke on the new guy. Guards get bored during night shifts. I'd worked enough of them to know how your mind starts to wander. I turned on the computer to check my email and noticed a coffee cup sitting on the edge of the desk. I picked it up and was surprised to find it still warm. The coffee was half finished. Someone must have been here recently. Maybe Tom had a cup before I arrived and forgot to throw it out. But he told me Jacob quit 3 days ago. The phone on the desk rang suddenly, making me jump. A quick look at the clock showed 11:25 p.m. I picked up the receiver. Security. A mechanical voice responded. Automated phone system test in progress. All lines operational. The line went dead. I put the receiver back and leaned in the chair. I'd heard that old buildings like this one run automated tests at certain times. I took out my sandwiches and thermos, getting ready for what would probably be a boring night. The monitor screen showed nothing but empty hallways and offices. Outside, Chicago was still busy even at night. But in here, everything felt strangely quiet. I looked at the list of rules on the desk again. Rule 1 said not to answer phones between 11:30 p.m. and 5 a.m. That automated test had come in right before that cutoff. As I drank my coffee, I kept thinking something felt off about this place. My hot coffee, the crazy stuff Jacob wrote in the logs, how nervous Tom acted, these strange rules. It all seemed suspicious, but I couldn't figure out why. But I don't buy into ghost stories or urban legends. Buildings are just buildings. Old ones make weird noises when they settle. Air conditioning systems make the temperature change, and bored security guards write creepy stuff in logs to mess with whoever works after them. I opened the logbook again and wrote my first entry. 10:30 p.m. Michael Wilson on duty. Building secure. All systems normal. The clock on the wall hit 11:25 p.m. Around the building, phones started ringing in empty offices as the system did its nightly test. I leaned back in my chair, waiting for them to stop. I had no idea that in 5 minutes I'd discover why that first rule was so important. The phone on the desk rang, its shrill tone cutting through the silence of the security office. I looked up from the logbook, somewhat startled. The wall clock read exactly 11:30 p.m. I reached for the receiver automatically, my mind still stuck on Jacob's strange final entries. It wasn't until my hand closed around the plastic that I remembered the first rule on the list Tom had given me. Never answer any phone calls between 11:30 p.m. and 5 a.m. too late. The receiver was already at my ear. "Security," I said. At first, there was nothing but static, a soft hiss that made me think the line had disconnected. Then came the voice, if you could call it that. It started as a whisper that seemed to bypass my ears and go straight into my brain. The sound twisted and shifted, going up and down in pitch like nothing I'd ever heard. Words formed in the static, but they weren't English or any language I knew. Pain hit behind my eyes. My stomach tied itself in knots like I'd eaten something bad. The voice grew louder, the whispers intensifying until it sounded like dozens of mouths speaking together, their words scratching against my thoughts like nails on a chalkboard. I slammed the phone down, my hand shaking so much I almost missed the cradle. The sound stopped, but an echo of it lingered in my head. A faint buzz that wouldn't go away. What the hell was that? I said to the empty room. The air around me grew suddenly colder. I rubbed my arms, feeling goosebumps. The temperature had dropped at least 10 degrees in seconds. I looked at the thermostat on the wall. It still read 72 degrees, same as earlier. I took several deep breaths, trying to calm down. It was just a prank call, I told myself. Some bored employee working late decided to mess with the new guy. The cold was probably just a draft or the AC turning on. 15 minutes later, I had almost convinced myself it was nothing. I'd made a fresh cup of coffee and was checking each monitor one by one, writing notes in the logbook. Then I saw it. Movement on camera 3 caught my eye. The feed showed the main entrance of the building, the glass doors that led out to the street. Standing just outside was a tall figure in a long black coat. The coat reached nearly to the ground, completely still, even though I knew the October wind was blowing outside. I couldn't see the figure's face. It was turned slightly away from the camera, but I knew for certain it was looking right at the lens, looking at me. I checked the other cameras, all clear. No one else could be seen in or around the building. I looked back at camera 3. The figure hadn't moved, not even an inch. It stood perfectly still, like a photograph rather than a live feed. 10 minutes passed, then 20. I couldn't look away, even as sweat formed on my forehead while the room stayed cold. Finally, after what felt like hours, the figure moved. One arm raised slowly toward the door, reaching with impossibly long fingers toward the handle. Rule 2 popped into my head. Avoid looking directly at any unusual figures on the security cameras. I looked away from the monitor, my heart racing. I needed to move, to do something other than sit there staring at whatever that was. I grabbed my flashlight and left the security office, making sure to lock the door behind me. The corridor was empty with yellowish light from the ceiling on the worn carpet. My footsteps sounded too loud in the quiet. The break room was on the same floor, just past the elevator bank. I headed there, telling myself I just needed more coffee. Though what I really wanted was to be somewhere without monitors showing what might be waiting outside. The break room was small but clean, with a kitchenette along one wall and a round table with chairs in the center. I turned on the lights and went straight for the coffee maker. As the machine started brewing, I leaned against the counter, trying to clear my head. That's when I noticed the bulletin board on the opposite wall. Most of it had the usual office notices, fire evacuation procedures, HR announcements, a faded cartoon about washing your hands. But in the bottom corner, partly hidden behind a takeout menu, were several yellowed newspaper clippings. I crossed the room and carefully moved the menu aside. The top clipping was dated November 2nd, 1978. The headline read, 7 Dead in Westfield Center Accident. Below it was a grainy photo of the building, looking much the same as it did now, except newer. Police and ambulances crowded the entrance. I read through the article quickly. Apparently, 7 maintenance workers had been found dead in the building's lowest level. The official cause was listed as an equipment malfunction resulting in toxic gas exposure, but the article noted that the bodies showed unusual trauma inconsistent with asphyxiation. The piece ended with a quote from the building's then owner claiming that safety measures would be improved. A smaller clipping beneath it, dated 2 weeks later, mentioned that the investigation had been closed with no further explanation. The final clipping, from 6 months after the incident, noted that the building had been sold to a new owner. The coffee maker beeped, pulling me from my reading. I poured a cup with shaky hands, my mind racing to connect what I was learning. The building had a history, a bad one, but old buildings often did. It didn't mean anything supernatural was happening. Gas leaks could cause hallucinations. Maybe Jacob had been affected by something similar. I looked at my watch. 12:35 a.m. I'd been away from the security desk longer than I'd planned. I took one last look at the clippings, trying to remember the details, then headed back toward the office. The corridor seemed darker on the way back, the shadows between light fixtures deeper than before. I walked faster, the coffee sloshing in my cup. When I reached the security office, I unlocked the door with shaky fingers and stepped inside. My eyes immediately went to the wall of monitors. Static filled every screen except camera 3. The snow-like interference covered the displays, making it impossible to see anything in the building. Only camera 3 stayed clear, showing the main entrance. The door now stood slightly open. I nearly dropped my coffee. I'd been at the desk when that door had last been checked, locked and secure. Now something had opened it. Something that had been standing outside just minutes earlier. I put the coffee down and grabbed the phone, planning to call the police. My finger stopped over the keypad as I remembered the voice from before. But this was different. This was an emergency. Before I could dial, movement on camera 3 caught my eye. Just for a second, I thought I saw a tall, thin shadow pass across the lobby, moving faster than seemed possible. Then that monitor, too, turned to static. "Screw this," I muttered, slamming the phone down. I went to the door and turned the deadbolt, then wedged a chair under the handle for good measure. Whatever was out there, it wasn't getting in here. Back at the monitors, I tried switching to different cameras, adjusting settings, anything to clear the static. Nothing worked. It was like every camera in the building had broken simultaneously. Then I remembered the system kept backups. All footage was stored for at least a week before being overwritten. I could check the previous nights, see if anything like this had happened before. I accessed the backup system and pulled up footage from 3 nights ago. Jacob's last shift. The timestamp read 2 a.m. The image showed the same lobby I'd just seen, but from a different angle. The front door was clearly visible, closed and locked, until it wasn't. At 2:03 a.m., Jacob appeared in frame, walking quickly toward the door. He kept looking over his shoulder like he was making sure no one was following him. He reached the door and paused, his hand on the lock. Something moved at the edge of the frame, a shadow or perhaps just a glitch in the recording. Jacob's head snapped toward it. Then, moving almost like a robot, he unlocked the door and pulled it open. The camera angle didn't show what or who was outside. Jacob stepped back, making room for someone to enter, though no one appeared on camera. His face, partially visible, looked completely terrified. The footage jumped ahead automatically to 4:50 a.m. Now Jacob was running through the hallways looking utterly panicked. He looked directly into a camera as he passed, mouth open like he was screaming, though the footage had no sound. At 4:59 a.m., 1 minute before his shift was supposed to end, he reached a fire exit door and slammed into the push bar. Then the feed cut out, leaving nothing but static. I sat back in my chair, feeling my pulse race. Whatever had happened to Jacob, it had started just like this. With the door opening to something that shouldn't be there. I checked my watch again. 12:45 a.m. I was stuck in this office following a set of rules I now understood were meant to keep me alive, with something in the building, something that had already claimed one security guard and was perhaps looking for another. I pulled out the list of rules again, reading them with new understanding. Stay in the supply closet from 3:33 a.m. to 3:57 a.m. Leave at exactly 5 a.m. No earlier and no later. These weren't company policies. They were survival tactics. I looked up at the static-filled monitors, knowing that somewhere beyond them, in the dark hallways of the Westfield Corporate Center, something was moving. And I had a bad feeling it was coming for me. I sat frozen in the chair, staring at the static-filled monitors. The image of Jacob running for his life stuck in my mind. The clock on the wall showed 12:45 a.m. The quiet buzz of the electronics around me seemed to grow louder in the silence. That footage explained why Jacob's coffee had still been warm. He hadn't quit 3 days ago. Something had happened to him right here in this building. Something that might now be coming for me. I looked again at the list of rules Tom had given me, reading each one carefully, no longer seeing them as strange company policies, but as warnings, survival instructions. Each one probably learned through someone's death. I tried the cameras again, switching inputs and adjusting settings, but the static stayed on all screens. I was essentially blind to whatever might be moving through the building. The security office suddenly felt more like a trap than a safe place. The temperature in the room kept dropping. I zipped up my jacket and rubbed my hands together, watching as my breath started to form small clouds in the air. The thermostat still showed 72 degrees, but it was at least 20 degrees colder than that now. I checked my watch. 12:55 a.m. That's when I heard it. Footsteps in the hallway outside. Slow, careful steps that didn't sound quite right. Too heavy, with an odd rhythm that no human would walk with. And something else, a wet, dragging sound with each step, like something being pulled across the floor. Rule 3 popped into my mind. If the temperature drops suddenly, turn off all lights and remain motionless. I jumped from my chair and hit the light switch, plunging the room into darkness. The light from the static-filled monitors cast everything in a blue-white glow. I dropped to the floor and crawled under the desk, pulling my legs in tight and making myself as small as possible. The footsteps stopped right outside the security office door. I could hear something wet and heavy pressing against it, followed by a sound like water being squeezed from a sponge. Looking toward the bottom of the door, I saw it. A dark liquid coming under the gap, spreading across the floor. The smell hit me next. copper and rot, like old blood mixed with something I couldn't identify. I put my hand over my mouth and nose, fighting the urge to gag. My entire body wanted to run, to get as far away from that door as possible, but I remembered the rule. Remain motionless. A labored breathing sound came from the other side of the door, wet and gurgling. Something scraped against the wood, not knocking, but more like claws or nails slowly dragging across the surface. The doorknob turned with a grinding sound as whatever was outside tried to get in. I watched, unable to look away as the knob turned completely. The lock caught, holding firm. I'd never been so thankful for a deadbolt. The thing on the other side of the door made a sound then, not quite a growl, not quite a word, but something in between that made the hair on my arms stand up. The doorknob shook violently for several seconds before going still. More scraping sounds, more of that wet, dragging noise. The dark liquid kept coming in, now covering several square feet of the floor. It moved strangely, not spreading like water would, but almost with purpose, stretching across the tiles. I sat completely still, focusing on breathing quietly through my nose. I was sweating even though I was cold. Minutes passed like hours. My muscles cramped from holding the same position, but I didn't dare move. After what felt like forever, the footsteps started again, moving away from the door and down the hallway. The wet dragging sound faded with them. I stayed under the desk, counting slowly in my head. 100, 200, 300. When I reached 500, I finally let myself move, unfolding stiff limbs and crawling out from under the desk. The dark liquid was gone. No trace of it on the floor, not even a stain where it had been. I stood on shaky legs and reached for the light switch, hesitated, then decided against it. Better to stay in the dark for now. The monitors still showed nothing but static. But as I watched, one of them cleared. Camera 12 showing the east corridor on the 3rd floor. The hallway looked empty at first, but then I noticed movement near the ceiling. A human-like shape hung from the ceiling tiles. Its limbs bent at angles that shouldn't be possible for a human body. It moved like a spider, each limb stretching to an impossible length before grabbing hold and pulling its body forward. Its head twisted completely backward as it moved, like it was searching for something behind it. As I watched, unable to look away, it reached an air vent, pulled the grate off effortlessly, and folded its impossible body into the small opening, disappearing from view. I sank into the chair, my legs too weak to hold me. What I'd just seen couldn't exist. It defied everything I knew about human biology, about reality itself. Yet the image was burned into my brain. Those long limbs, that backward-facing head. A loud bang snapped me out of my thoughts. Then another. Someone was pounding on the main entrance doors. Camera 3 came back to life just as I turned toward it. The static cleared, showing the front entrance. A police officer stood outside, pounding on the glass and waving frantically. He cupped his hands around his eyes, trying to see inside. My first thought was relief. Help had arrived. But then Rule 4 came back to me. Do not open the main doors for anyone after midnight, no matter who they appear to be. The officer kept pounding. He looked real. Uniform, badge, equipment belt, all exactly as you'd expect. He shouted something, his face urgent, though I couldn't hear him through the monitors. I wasn't sure what to do. What if this was a real emergency? What if the building truly was in danger? The officer pulled out a small notepad and wrote something, holding it up to the glass. Even through the grainy camera feed, I could read the message. Gas leak. Need to evacuate building immediately. My hand moved toward the phone. I should call this in. Check if police were really dispatched here. But I remembered what happened the last time I answered the phone. Rule 1. Never answer any phone calls between 11:30 p.m. and 5 a.m. On the monitor, the officer grew more agitated, pounding harder on the glass. He wrote another message. "Can see you on camera. Open now. Lives at risk." That made me pause. How did he know I could see him on camera? The monitor was in the security office, not visible from outside. And if there was a gas leak, why was he alone? Where were the fire department, the utility workers, the evacuation team? I remembered Jacob's footage, how he had opened the door even though he was scared. How whatever came through that door wasn't visible on camera. The officer outside kept pounding, his face growing angry. Then mid-motion, he stopped. His entire body went still, unnaturally rigid. His head slowly tilted to one side, far beyond what a human neck should allow. His face, previously anxious and urgent, smoothed out. A smile spread across his features, too wide, stretching from ear to ear. I watched as he straightened up, that impossible smile still fixed on his face. He stared directly into the camera, directly at me, then turned and walked away. His movements were wrong, jerky and broken, like a puppet with tangled strings. Just before he walked out of view, he looked back over his shoulder. The smile grew even wider, showing too many teeth. Then he was gone, leaving only the empty entrance on the monitor. I slumped back in my chair, my shirt soaked with sweat, even though it was cold. The rules had saved my life twice now. Whatever Tom had known, whatever Jacob had learned too late, it was real. The things in this building, whatever they were, could take forms that looked human. They could imitate, but not perfectly. I stared at the static-filled monitors, wondering what other forms they might take before the night was over. The clock read 1:45 a.m. More than 3 hours until I could leave. 3 hours during which I needed to stay alive in a building that was hunting me. I pulled out the rules again, reading Rule 5 with new understanding. Stay in the supply closet from 3:33 a.m. to 3:57 a.m. every night. Something specific happened during those 24 minutes. Something I didn't want to be around for. The static on the monitors seemed to pulse slightly, like the building had a heartbeat. I wondered how many others had sat in this chair watching these screens, realizing too late what kind of place they were trapped in. And I wondered if I'd make it to 5 a.m. to find out. The static on the monitors kept pulsing like a heartbeat. I sat in the dark office trying to comprehend what I'd just witnessed. The fake cop, the spider thing in the hall, the cold liquid coming under the door. None of it made any sense. I pulled out the rules again and read them repeatedly. The fifth one caught my eye. Stay in the supply closet from 3:33 a.m. to 3:57 a.m. Why those exact times? What was happening during those 24 minutes that was so dangerous I had to hide? The monitors flickered, some showing clear pictures for a second before reverting to static. I caught glimpses of empty hallways, dark offices, and the main lobby with its front doors shut tight. Nothing seemed to be moving through the building. I needed to know more. Jacob definitely knew something. His notes showed he was figuring things out before whatever happened to him, but the official logbook just had basic entries. If he found anything important, he probably hid it somewhere. I examined the security desk. It was old, made of wood with numerous drawers. I started searching through each drawer systematically. Most just contained normal office supplies, building plans, tenant information. Nothing helpful. The bottom drawer was locked. I tried all my keys until one worked. Inside, I found a stack of old newspapers. More stories about strange occurrences in the building. Deaths, people going missing, unusual accidents. They all happened every few years. I set them aside to examine later. That's when I noticed something odd about the desk. The bottom drawer wasn't as deep as it should be. I entered it and felt along the back. It was looser than normal. I pressed different spots until I heard a click and a small section of the panel popped out. Behind it was a hidden compartment. I reached in and pulled out an old, stained leather journal. I placed it on the desk and opened it. The first entry was from June 1975. The handwriting was neat and clear. First night on shift, building seems normal. Mr. Harris mentioned some special rules to follow. Seems odd, but the pay is good. The next few entries described routine nights, but then something's wrong with the elevator. It took me to the basement when I pressed 5. Doors opened to darkness. Heard breathing. Press door close immediately. Talk to day guard Tom. He says to avoid the elevator between 2 to 3 o'clock a.m. I flipped forward. Different handwriting now, shaky and hurried. March 1982. Saw it again tonight. Standing at the end of the hall on 14. Tall, wearing that same black coat. Don't look directly at it. It knows when you see it. More entries followed, each from a different guard based on the handwriting. Each one documented different encounters, different rules learned often through terrifying experiences. Some described things that could appear human but moved strangely. Others mentioned symbols appearing on walls, temperature drops, weird sounds emanating from inside the walls. I reached the more recent entries. Jacob's handwriting. September 12th, something tried to call me tonight. Answered before remembering Tom's warning. Heard words that made my head hurt. Hung up. Won't make that mistake again. September 15th, saw a man standing outside. Not a man. Something else. It smiled too wide. Its teeth. Jesus. Its teeth. September 17th. It's getting colder each night. Found symbols drawn in the bathroom mirror. Wiped them away, but they came back. September 20th. They know I've seen too much. I closed the journal and set it down. My hands were trembling. This was worse than I thought. This building had been, whatever the right word might be, haunted or infected for decades. Guards had been dealing with these things for years, passing down what they knew through hidden notes and warnings. The clock showed 2:30 a.m. I'd been reading for almost an hour. I returned to the official logbook and wrote, "Building secure, all quiet." A lie? But what else could I write? Building full of impossible creatures. For the next 45 minutes, I continued reading the old newspaper clippings to learn more about the building's history. It was built in 1923. First deaths were in 1925. For workers found in the basement with unusual wounds. The building changed owners every few decades, always after strange incidents. At 3:15 a.m., it became freezing cold. It happened so fast I gasped, seeing my breath in the air immediately. Within seconds, frost started forming on the windows, creating delicate patterns right before my eyes. The cold was intense and deep. It was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. The lights began to flicker, not randomly, but in a pattern, on, off, on, off. Then 2 quick flashes, then 3. This pattern repeated throughout the building. From what I could see on the few working monitors, it looked like some kind of code or signal. I looked at my watch. 3:22 a.m. I needed to get to the supply closet. Rule 5 seemed critically important now. I grabbed my flashlight and the journal, unlocked the office door, and peered into the hallway. It was empty. The blinking lights created moving shadows that seemed to shift on their own. It was even colder outside the office, cold enough to make my eyes water and my lungs hurt when I breathed. I moved quickly but quietly down the hall. The supply closet was at the end past the break room. As I walked, the lights kept flashing in that pattern, making it difficult to see. The shadows grew and shrank with each flash. The walls looked different. When the lights came on, I could see dark stains spreading across them, like wet paint. They formed partial designs, strange symbols I couldn't quite comprehend. A sound made me stop. A low, vibrating noise that seemed to come from inside the walls. It rose in pitch until it nearly hurt my ears. Then it abruptly stopped, leaving total silence. I started moving again, faster now. The supply closet was just ahead. I could see the door, a plain metal one with the storage printed on it. I reached it at 3:31 a.m. according to my watch. I fumbled with the keys, found the right one, and unlocked it. Inside was a small room with shelves of cleaning supplies, tools, light bulbs, and miscellaneous items. I closed the door behind me, locked it, and leaned against it, breathing hard. I shone my flashlight around the small space. That's when I saw them. A flashlight just like mine and an ID badge sitting on a middle shelf, partly hidden behind some boxes. I picked up the badge. Jacob's photo looked back at me, his face serious but normal, very different from the terrified expression I'd seen in the security footage. He had been here hiding just like me, following the same rule. But it hadn't saved him. I checked my watch. 3:33 a.m. exactly. Whatever happened during these 24 minutes, I was about to discover. At first, nothing changed. The closet was cold, but quiet. I sat on the floor, back against the door, flashlight pointed at the ceiling to provide some light. I searched through the journal again for anything about this specific time. There was one entry written in shaky handwriting. Don't listen to the voices. Not real. Cover your ears if you have to. Don't open the door no matter what. As if on cue, the whispering started. It was quiet at first, like a radio playing several rooms away. Voices too soft to distinguish. But they grew louder, more insistent. They came from everywhere, the walls, the ceiling, even from the cleaning bottles on the shelves. The words became clearer, but I didn't recognize the language. Hearing them gave me goosebumps and a headache. With the whispers came other sounds. Wet, disgusting noises like meat tearing or bones breaking. Then I heard footsteps, numerous of them coming from all directions, heavy and slow. They stopped right outside the supply closet. I stopped breathing and pressed my back hard against the door. Something scratched at the door. Soft at first, then harder. Tap, tap, tap. Scratch. 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 A rhythm that made my teeth ache. The whispers grew louder until they became screams. High-pitched cries that didn't sound human. They matched the same pattern as the flashing lights earlier. The door handle shook violently, metal scraping against metal as something attempted to get in. The entire door rattled. I pushed back against it, though I knew that if these things truly wanted to get in, a locked door wouldn't stop them. "Michael, are you in there?" The voice sounded like Tom's. Same tone, same slight accent. "Michael, please. I need your help. There's been an accident." But something was off about the voice. It sounded correct in a technical way, but didn't feel real, like someone had programmed a computer to speak. "Just open the door, just for a second, please. I'm hurt." The pleading continued, growing more desperate. Then the voice switched to Jacob's. "Let me in, man. They're after me, please." Then a child's voice. Then an old woman's. Then several speaking together in perfect unison. I pressed my hands over my ears, but the voices penetrated anyway. I started humming to myself, trying to block them out. I kept my eyes on my watch, counting the minutes. 3:40, 3:45, 3:50. The assault on the door intensified. Something heavy kept slamming against it. The hinges creaked. A dark liquid started seeping under the door just like before in the office. It moved with apparent purpose, beginning to form symbols on the floor. I pulled my feet up, hugging my knees to my chest. The liquid kept spreading, now climbing up the walls, even though it shouldn't be able to, creating more patterns. The small space filled with a copper smell, metallic and thick. 3:55, 2 more minutes. The door bent inward as something pushed against it with tremendous force. The metal deformed but didn't break. The voices had become a cacophony of noise, screaming and begging and laughing all at once. 3:56, everything stopped. The liquid froze in place. The voices cut off mid-scream. The pressure against the door vanished. The silence came so suddenly and completely that my ears rang. 3:57, I waited another minute just to be safe. Nothing happened. The time had passed. I lowered my hands from my ears and stood up. The liquid that had been forming symbols was gone without a trace on the floor or walls. I unlocked the door with shaky hands and opened it slightly, peeking out. The hallway was empty. The lights were on, steady now. No more flickering. But the walls were covered with symbols made of a dark reddish-brown substance. Strange patterns of curves and angles that hurt my eyes when I looked directly at them. They covered everything, floor to ceiling. The smell hit me immediately. Copper, like blood, but with something else underneath it. Something ancient and wrong. I stepped into the hallway, careful not to touch any of the symbols. They seemed to shift slightly when I saw them from the corner of my eye, but remained still when I looked directly at them. Something glinted on the floor near my feet. I bent down to examine it. A security badge, old and yellowed. The photo showed a young man with a mustache and 70s-style hair. The name read Alan Pritchard, and the date at the bottom was 1982. It was 40 years old, but it looked like someone had dropped it just minutes ago. I put the badge in my pocket and looked around. The building felt different now, quieter. Whatever had happened during those 24 minutes had changed something. The symbols on the walls emitted a faint glow, almost as if they were somehow alive in a way I couldn't comprehend. I checked my watch. 4 a.m. 1 more hour until I could leave. 1 more hour in a building that wasn't just haunted. It was something else entirely, something much older and more dangerous than ordinary ghost stories. I needed to get back to the security office and figure out what to do next. The journal had provided some answers but created even more questions. Most importantly, what happened to Jacob? And was I heading for the same fate? I walked carefully through the hallway, trying to avoid the strange symbols that covered everything. The old security badge I'd found, Alan Pritchard, 1982, felt heavy in my pocket. It reminded me I wasn't the first person to walk these halls and confront whatever inhabited this building. Getting back to the security office took longer than it should have. I kept my eyes mostly on the floor, trying not to look directly at the symbols. Something about their shapes made my head ache and my vision blur whenever I examined them too long. The hallway seemed impossibly long under the fluorescent lights that were now functioning overhead. When I finally reached the security office, I locked the door behind me and checked the time. 4:05 a.m. less than an hour until I could leave this place. The thought of freedom, of fresh air, of escaping the horrors within these walls made my hands tremble. The monitors had cleared while I was gone. No more static, just clear views of empty hallways, stairwells, and entrances. The symbols that covered the walls in person weren't appearing on the camera feeds at all, making the building appear normal and mundane. That discrepancy bothered me more than anything else I'd witnessed tonight. I sat at the desk and rewound the footage to 3:33 a.m. I wanted to see what the cameras captured during those 24 minutes I'd spent hiding in the supply closet. Despite all the scratching at the door, the voices, and the banging on the metal door, the video showed nothing. Empty hallways, empty stairwells, a quiet, still building. The time code advanced 3:35, 3:40, 3:45. Nothing. No movement anywhere. Not even shadows or changes in light. At 3:57, the footage showed me emerging from the supply closet, looking terrified, staring at walls that appeared blank on camera but which I knew were covered in those disturbing symbols. I leaned back in the chair, feeling unsettled by this new discovery. Whatever was here could manipulate reality, or at least how reality was perceived. It could hide from cameras while terrorizing people. It could create symbols that human eyes could see but digital recordings couldn't. I glanced over at the parking garage cameras. Most spaces were empty this late, but I spotted a familiar sedan. Tom's car was still there, parked in the same spot I'd seen it when I arrived for my shift. That seemed odd. Tom had practically run out of the building when handing over to me. Why would his car still be here hours later? A disturbing thought occurred to me. What if Tom never actually left the building? What if he'd just gone somewhere else inside? I checked my watch again. For 22 a.m. I had less than 40 minutes until I could leave. The smart thing would be to stay put, wait it out, and run at exactly 5 a.m. That's what the rules said. That's what kept people alive in this place. But Tom's car concerned me. The day guard had been strange and nervous, but he'd also warned me and given me the rules that had kept me alive so far. If he was still here, perhaps he needed help. Perhaps he knew more about what was happening. I stood and gathered my belongings, placing Jacob's journal in my pocket alongside Alan Pritchard's old badge. I grabbed my flashlight, even though the building lights were functioning again. On a desk notepad, I wrote the time I planned to leave the office and where I was going, just in case someone found it later and needed to know. I unlocked the door and stepped back into the hallway. The symbols still covered everything, glowing faintly with a reddish light. I made my way to the elevator, pressed the call button, and waited. When the doors opened, I hesitated, recalling one of the journal entries about the elevator taking someone to the basement instead of their chosen floor. But I needed to reach the second floor quickly, and the stairs seemed like a poor option with those symbols everywhere. I stepped inside and pressed 2. The elevator moved smoothly upward and stopped exactly where it should. When the doors opened, I half expected to see something nightmarish, but it was just another hallway looking identical to the one I'd left, with the same symbols covering the walls, floor, and ceiling. Tom's office was at the end of the hall. As I approached, I noticed light emanating from under the door. A thin yellow line across the darkness. I slowed down, suddenly uncertain. Perhaps this was a trap. Perhaps whatever wanted me dead was trying to lure me in by promising answers. I reached the door and stood there listening. No sound came from inside. No movement, no breathing, nothing. Just silence. I knocked lightly, not really expecting an answer, but feeling I should announce my presence. When no one responded, I tried the handle. The door opened easily, revealing Tom's office, a larger, nicer version of the security station downstairs. There was a proper desk, filing cabinets, a coffee maker, and a small TV on the wall. And behind the desk, sitting in his chair, was Tom. He sat completely still, staring straight ahead. His eyes were open but didn't track me as I entered the room. His face had that same waxy, pale look I'd noticed when I first met him. But now I understood it wasn't just stress or poor health. It was death. I moved closer, part of me already knowing what I would find, but needing to confirm anyway. As I came around the desk, I saw the full horror of what had happened to Tom. His shirt was torn open, revealing a gaping hole in his chest where his heart should have been. The wound wasn't jagged or bloody. It was clean, almost surgical, as if something had reached inside carefully and simply taken what it wanted. I backed away, bumping into the filing cabinet behind me. Tom was dead. Probably had been dead for hours. Perhaps since shortly after he'd given me those rules and tried to leave the building, or thought he had left. On the desk in front of Tom's body was an open folder, pages neatly arranged as if left for me to find. I forced myself to look away from the horrifying wound and focus on the documents. The folder contained employment records, dozens of them, spanning 50 years. Night security guards who had worked at the Westfield Corporate Center. I flipped through them quickly, examining the hire dates and end dates. A pattern emerged immediately. Each guard had worked exactly 3 nights before their employment terminated. The reason fields varied: quit without notice, no show, family emergency. But the timing was always the same. 3 nights. Then I found Jacob's file. Hired 3 weeks ago. Terminated after 3 shifts. Reason: no show. Presumed quit. A handwritten note was paperclipped to the inside of the folder. The handwriting matched the hurried script on the rules Tom had given me. If you're reading this, I didn't make it. I'm sorry. I tried to warn you more directly than my predecessor warned me. The building was constructed on top of something ancient. Something that feeds on fear before it consumes its victims. I don't know what it is exactly, but it's been here longer than the building, longer than the city, perhaps. The ownership changes regularly. Those who learn the truth either flee or become victims themselves. Some try to contain it by following the rules, establishing patterns that keep it not satisfied, but manageable. I thought I could break the cycle. I was wrong. I stayed too long, saw too much. By my 3rd week, it knew me too well. Knew when I was most afraid, when I would make mistakes. It only needs 3 nights to learn you, to understand what scares you most. This is your first night. You can still escape if you follow the rules. Get out at 5 a.m. exactly. Don't come back. Don't let them convince you to come back. They'll try. New management, higher pay, whatever it takes. Run. Run as far from this place as you can. The note ended there. I read it twice, trying to absorb what Tom had told me. The building itself, or something beneath it, was the entity causing all this. The shapes I'd seen, the voices I'd heard, even that police officer with the unsettling wide smile, they were all manifestations of the same thing. It was studying me just as it had studied Jacob and Tom and everyone before. I checked my watch. For 43 a.m. 17 minutes until I could leave. I photographed the employment records with my phone, though I wasn't sure how they'd help. Who would believe me? Who would accept that some impossibly ancient entity was living beneath an office building in downtown Chicago, feeding on people's fear and taking their hearts? When I turned to leave, I noticed something on Tom's computer screen. It was an email from earlier that evening, right before my shift started. The subject line read, "New night security guard." I moved closer to read it. "Tom, we've selected another candidate to replace Jacob. Name's Michael Wilson. Background in private security, former military. Should work out better than the last one. He starts tonight. Remember, standard procedure. 3 nights is all we need. Management." I felt sick to my stomach. 3 nights. That's all they needed. I was being set up just like Jacob had been, just like Tom before him, and Alan Pritchard, and who knew how many others over the years. But Tom had tried to break the pattern. He'd warned me directly on my first night, giving me information that had taken him weeks to discover. He'd tried to save me, and it cost him his life. I backed away from the desk, from Tom's lifeless stare and the hole in his chest. I needed to get out of this building at exactly 5 a.m., and I needed to never, ever return. I headed back to the elevator, pressed the call button, and waited. The symbols on the wall seemed to move faster now, as if excited or anticipating something. The elevator arrived and I stepped inside, pressing the button for the main floor. As the doors closed, I saw something moving at the end of the hallway, a tall figure in a long black coat with its face hidden in shadow. The same figure I'd seen on the security cameras earlier in the night. It just stood there watching me as the elevator doors shut. The ride down was silent. When the doors opened again, I half ran to the security office, needing to grab my belongings before escaping. The symbols on the walls appeared brighter now, almost glowing, their strange patterns seeming to shift when I didn't look directly at them. Inside the office, I grabbed my bag and jacket. I made one final entry in the logbook. Building secure, ending shift at 5 a.m. A complete lie. But what else could I write? No one would believe the truth anyway. The clock on the wall read for 56 a.m. For minutes. I stood by the main entrance, keys in hand, ready to unlock the doors the moment my watch showed 5. Not a second earlier, not a second later. That was the rule. And the rules had kept me alive so far. Those last 4 minutes felt like an eternity. I could sense the building was somehow aware of me, watching my every move. The symbols on the wall seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat, as if we were connected somehow. My watch beeped softly. 5 a.m. I unlocked the main doors, pushed them open, and stepped into the cool morning air. The cold morning air felt refreshing on my face after the oppressive atmosphere inside. But the building wasn't ready to release me. As I walked forward, the overhead lights began shattering behind me, one after another, glass raining down with sparks. The noise followed me like gunshots, the lobby lights, the wall lights, the emergency lights, all exploding in sequence. I started running, my shadow jerking across the parking lot with each new burst of light. 20 feet from the entrance now, 15. The concrete beneath my feet seemed to shift and undulate, attempting to make me fall. A loud crack sounded from behind. I glanced back to see the front doors closing by themselves. Massive glass panels moving impossibly fast. Without slowing, I threw myself forward in a desperate dive. My shoulder caught in the small gap between the doors as they slammed against me. Pain shot through my arm, but I made it through to the other side just as the doors closed with a final click. I stumbled forward, nearly falling, but catching myself just in time. My right shoulder ached where the doors had caught me, but nothing seemed broken. I continued toward my car, pulling the keys from my pocket with trembling fingers. The sky was growing lighter in the east. The sun was rising over Chicago, painting the clouds pink and orange. My watch said 5:02 a.m. I had made it out during the safe window. As I reached my car, something made me turn back for one final look at the Westfield Corporate Center. What I saw froze me with terror. Every window of the 20-story building contained a figure. Dozens of them, hundreds, all completely still, all watching me. Some appeared as office workers in business attire. Others wore maintenance uniforms or security guard outfits from various eras. A woman in 1970s-style clothing. A man with a handlebar mustache who might have been Alan Pritchard. And on the second floor, standing in what I knew was Tom's office, was the man in the black coat. Even from this distance, I could feel him staring at me, a weight pressing against my skin. None of them moved. None of them waved or did anything. They simply watched as I unlocked my car with shaking hands, got inside, and started the engine. They were still watching, lined up in perfect rows across the building's facade as I drove out of the parking lot and left. 3 days later, I sat across from Detective Sarah Martinez at the Chicago Police Department. The small interview room felt cramped and oppressive. Its blank walls reminded me of the symbol-covered hallways I'd fled. When I told them about finding Tom's body, they didn't believe me at first, which I expected. Who would believe a story about ancient entities living in the walls of a downtown office building? Let me get this straight, Mr. Wilson, Martinez said, tapping her pen against her notepad. You're claiming that something supernatural killed Thomas Rodriguez by removing his heart. I know how it sounds, I said. But I saw his body. The wound was too clean to be made by any normal weapon. And there were other things happening in that building, things I can't explain. I'd given Martinez an edited version of events. I mentioned finding Tom's body, discovering the employment records, and noticing patterns of disappearances. I omitted the symbols on the walls, the voices in the supply closet, and the thing pretending to be a police officer. Even with my censored account, I could see the doubt in her eyes. Until yesterday, Martinez said, opening a folder on the table between us. Construction crews were checking the foundation for structural damage after reports of unusual settling. They found a sealed room that wasn't on any blueprint. She slid a photograph across the table. I picked it up, already dreading what I might see. 12 bodies, she continued. All male, ages ranging from mid-20s to late 40s, all with the same wound pattern as Rodriguez, a precision removal of the heart. Based on varying stages of decomposition, the deaths occurred over several decades. I stared at the photograph. The sealed room appeared very old, with walls of rough stone rather than modern concrete. The bodies had been arranged in a circle, their arms and legs positioned to form a symbol similar to the ones I'd noticed covering the walls. We've identified 9 of them so far, Martinez said. All former security guards at Westfield Corporate Center, including Jacob, the man you replaced. She watched my reaction carefully. I wasn't surprised, and she could tell. This is why I called you back in, Mr. Wilson. Your statement included details you couldn't have known. You mentioned employment records showing a pattern of guards working exactly 3 nights. Our investigation confirms this pattern going back decades. Martinez pulled out more documents. Newspaper articles yellowed with age dating back to the building's construction. The Westfield Corporate Center has a history most people don't know about, she said. Look at these. She spread the articles across the table. The oldest was from 1925, just 2 years after the building was built. The headline read, "For workers found dead in new office building." Another from 1954, "Mysterious disappearances plague downtown office complex." Then 1983, "String of deaths leads to closure of Westfield Center." New ownership promises renovations and reopening. Examining each article revealed a pattern. Approximately every 30 years, deaths and disappearances would increase. Then the building would change owners and close temporarily for renovations. The current owner, Richard Harris, has vanished without a trace, Martinez said. His office claims he's on an extended business trip abroad, but no one has any record of his travel. His passport hasn't been used. His credit cards are untouched. I looked up from the articles. You believe me now? It wasn't a question, but Martinez nodded. Let's say I believe something is happening in that building that defies conventional explanation. I don't know if I'm ready to accept your more supernatural interpretations, but the facts are too strange to ignore. She gathered the articles, returning them to her folder. We've closed the building while we investigate. No one's allowed in or out without police escort. That won't stop it, I said quietly. Stop what exactly? I hesitated. How could I explain what I'd experienced? What I now knew. That the building itself was somehow alive, or possessed by something ancient that fed on fear before consuming its victims. Whatever killed those people, I finally said. Whatever killed Tom. It's not something you can contain with police tape and locked doors. Martinez looked at me for a long moment. You're genuinely terrified, aren't you? Yes, I admitted. And you should be, too. Our meeting concluded shortly after. Martina said she'd keep me informed about the investigation and asked me to remain available for further questions. As I was gathering my belongings to leave, she asked one final question. The rules you mentioned in your statement. Never answer calls between certain hours. Stay in a closet at specific times. Leave exactly at 5 a.m. Where did these come from? Tom gave them to me, I said. They were passed down from guard to guard. Rules for survival. And you followed them. That's why I'm alive. As I exited the police station, my phone rang. The number looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't immediately place it. I answered hesitantly. Michael Wilson speaking. Mr. Wilson, this is Andrea from Westfield Management Company. Her voice was pleasant and professional. I'm calling regarding your recent employment with us. We understand there was an incident during your shift. I stopped walking and froze on the sidewalk as people passed by. We'd like to offer you a special assignment, she continued. Just one more night at the building to retrieve some security footage for the police investigation. We're offering triple your normal pay rate given the unusual circumstances. My mouth went dry. The building is closed for investigation. We have special permission, Andrea assured me smoothly. Just one night, Mr. Wilson. We need someone familiar with the security systems, and you're the only qualified person available. Just one more night. Triple pay. The words from Tom's note echoed in my mind, they'll try. New management, higher pay, whatever it takes. Run. I'm not interested, I said firmly. I'm no longer employed with Westfield, and I have no intention of returning to that building. Mr. Wilson, I don't think you understand the opportunity. I hung up, my phone still trembling in my hand. They were already attempting to lure me back, just as Tom had warned. That evening, I returned to my apartment completely exhausted. The past 3 days had been nothing but police interviews, no sleep, and jumping at every little sound. I started seeing symbols everywhere I looked, in tile floors, brick walls, even the way my books sat on my shelves. At night, I dreamed of dark hallways and voices whispering things I couldn't quite hear. I unlocked my door and stepped inside, immediately sensing something was wrong. Nothing appeared out of place, but the air felt different, cooler, with a strange quality that made the hair on my arms stand up. On the floor just inside the door was a white envelope that hadn't been there when I left this morning. My name was written on it in neat block letters. No stamp, no return address. Someone had slipped it under my door while I was out. I picked it up and tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper containing the 6 rules I'd come to know by heart, followed by a message, they know you survived. They'll find you eventually. I felt cold all over. I checked my locks, pulled the blinds, and sat in the dark living room trying to quiet my racing thoughts. The note meant I wasn't safe. Escaping the building wouldn't help. Whatever was in the Westfield Corporate Center had somehow found me. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed a duffel bag from my closet and started packing clothes, toiletries, my passport, and enough cash to get far away from Chicago. I took Jacob's journal and the old badge I'd found, shoving them deep in the bag as proof of what had happened to me. The thing in that building was trapped for now, confined behind police tape and locked doors. But I wondered how long that would last. The articles Martinez had shown me revealed a pattern spanning nearly 100 years. It adapted, acquired new owners, renovated the building, and continued killing. Within an hour, I had loaded my belongings into my car. I looked at my apartment one last time, knowing I'd never return. Then I drove, heading south out of the city without knowing where I was going, just away from Chicago. In my mirror, I watched the city lights grow smaller in the distance. Somewhere back in all those illuminated buildings stood the Westfield Corporate Center, its windows dark, waiting. I drove all night, watching until I couldn't see the building anymore.